They already know exactly where they want you to be. And it's not out in public. They've been quietly making room for you inside the most personal parts of their life, catching themselves picturing you there for so long that it no longer feels imaginary. The part they haven't admitted to anyone is this: they don't want you there for a few minutes. They keep imagining hours passing while you're simply existing beside them. And what keeps happening in those imagined moments is the reason this reading had to begin here. It isn't the exciting version of you that keeps returning to them. That's what surprised me first. Most people become fascinated by conversations, by chemistry, by moments that are loud enough to remember. This isn't that. They keep drifting toward the version of you that isn't performing anything at all. The one quietly looking out of a window, the one absent-mindedly fixing your sleeve. The one reading something without realizing anyone is watching. Somehow those ordinary moments have become the ones they revisit the most. They imagine being in the same room without needing constant conversation because, strangely enough, silence doesn't feel empty when they picture you in it. It feels full. They catch themselves thinking about how peaceful it would be if you were simply nearby, doing your own thing while they did theirs. That image refuses to leave. And the more life becomes stressful, the more their mind runs back to that same scene, because your quiet presence has started feeling less like company and more like the place their nervous system finally settles. Wait. The part they haven't admitted to themselves yet is why being near you, without either of you saying much at all, suddenly feels more valuable than every exciting connection they've experienced before. Time behaves differently whenever their thoughts land on you, and I don't mean in some poetic way. It happens in such ordinary moments that it actually unsettles them. They'll sit down, meaning to check one thing connected to you, maybe replay a conversation, maybe remember the way you laughed once, maybe wonder what you're doing right now. And then they look back at the clock and far more time has disappeared than they realized. Oh, that keeps happening. They don't notice the minutes leaving because their attention becomes completely absorbed by tiny details most people would forget within seconds. They replay expressions, pauses, little habits, even the comfortable spaces between words, almost as though their mind refuses to rush past anything connected to you. That's when they started realizing something was changing inside them. They weren't just interested anymore. They had begun lingering. And lingering is dangerous because it quietly turns into attachment before anyone announces it. The strange part is they never feel impatient while imagining you. If anything, they wish those imagined moments lasted longer, which leads directly into the next thing, because once someone begins losing track of time around the idea of you, they eventually begin wondering where you actually belong inside their everyday life. There is one place they almost never let people reach, and no, it isn't a physical room. It's the version of themselves that only appears when the day is completely over, when the responsibilities stop, when nobody expects anything from them anymore. That's the space they keep catching themselves placing you inside. Not because they're lonely, but because your presence somehow fits there without forcing itself in. They imagine simple evenings more than dramatic moments. You sitting nearby while everything slows down, sharing the same couch without needing to entertain each other, looking over for no reason except to make sure you're still there. They keep building these incredibly ordinary pictures, yet those ordinary pictures carry more emotion than anything flashy ever could. That's how they know this has become different. People don't instinctively protect space for someone unless that person already feels emotionally safe in their mind. And here's what keeps echoing. They haven't just imagined inviting you into that space once. They've quietly returned to the same picture over and over again until it has begun feeling strangely familiar, almost like a memory that somehow belongs to a future they haven't reached yet. They've been trying to understand why being around the thought of you creates such a strange sense of relief, and every explanation they come up with feels incomplete. Attraction usually feels exciting. It speeds everything up. This does the opposite. Whenever your image crosses their mind, something inside them settles. It's almost unsettling how quickly the noise disappears. They picture you walking into an ordinary room, placing your bag down, looking around without saying much, and somehow the entire atmosphere changes. Not because you did anything dramatic, because your presence makes ordinary moments feel worth staying in. They don't imagine perfect dates nearly as often as they imagine completely forgettable evenings that somehow become unforgettable simply because you're there. That's what keeps pulling them back. Home has stopped meaning a location in their mind. It's becoming a feeling, and that feeling keeps borrowing your face. Wait. The more this image repeats itself, the less they can convince themselves it's only imagination. Their heart has already started treating you like someone who belongs there. The biggest surprise isn't that they remember you, it's what they remember. They aren't replaying grand conversations or dramatic moments. No, it's the tiny things that somehow refuse to leave. The way you pause before answering, the absent-minded way you brush your hair back without realizing it, the little expression that appears for half a second when something genuinely makes you smile. Oh, these details have become permanent residents in their mind. Sometimes they'll suddenly remember one of those tiny habits while doing something completely unrelated, and everything else quietly fades into the background for a moment. They don't even notice it's happening anymore. Their mind simply returns there on its own. That's when they realized something deeper was unfolding. Because people don't accidentally memorize details nobody else notices. They do it when someone begins occupying emotional space they never planned to give away. And every time another forgotten little habit floats back into their memory, the picture of you somehow becomes even more vivid than the last time. Without realizing it, they've started leaving space in places that used to belong only to them, not because you've asked, because their mind keeps acting as though your arrival is already being prepared for. They'll imagine future plans and instinctively wonder where you'd be standing. They'll picture ordinary weekends and notice there's an empty place beside them that somehow already feels reserved. Even decisions that have nothing to do with relationships quietly become connected to you before they catch themselves doing it. That's the part that caught me off guard. This isn't wishful thinking anymore. It's becoming instinct. Their life has started reorganizing itself around possibilities they haven't even spoken aloud. And every time they catch themselves doing it, they pause for a second, almost surprised by how natural it feels. They don't force those thoughts away anymore because they keep returning exactly the same. Which raises a much bigger question they haven't been able to answer yet. If making room for you already feels this natural now, what happens the moment you're no longer just part of their imagination? Something shifted the moment they stopped imagining conversations with you and started imagining simply watching you exist. That sounds small until you realize what it actually means. They picture you getting lost in your own thoughts, laughing at something nobody else noticed, adjusting your clothes without thinking about it, becoming completely unaware that anyone is paying attention. Those are the moments that stay with them the longest. There is no performance in those memories, no expectation, no pressure for you to impress them. In fact, the less aware you seem of being observed, the more drawn in they become. They don't want a version of you that is trying to be perfect. They keep returning to the one who forgets the world is watching. That's the version that feels impossible to replace. Wait, they have caught themselves smiling at imagined moments that haven't even happened yet, and somehow those imagined scenes feel more emotionally real than memories from people they've actually known for years. That realization has quietly unsettled them. There are people who fill silence because they're uncomfortable with it, and then there is whatever this is. They imagine long stretches where neither of you is saying very much, yet somehow nothing feels missing. Oh, that's become strangely important to them. They keep wondering what it would feel like to share the same room while each of you is doing something completely different, only occasionally looking up and finding the other person still there. No constant reassurance. No need to entertain, just an effortless kind of peace they've struggled to find anywhere else. That image keeps returning because it feels honest. They have spent enough time around connections that demanded constant energy to survive. This doesn't feel demanding, it feels restorative, almost like the silence itself changes when you're part of it. And that's what keeps pulling them back to the same quiet picture over and over again. Because once someone starts craving peaceful moments with you, instead of exciting ones, they're no longer imagining an encounter, they're imagining a life. This is where everything quietly becomes more serious than they expected. They don't keep imagining special occasions anymore. Those faded into the background a while ago. What keeps appearing instead are completely ordinary days. Waking up without rushing, walking through the kitchen while you're already there, asking you something random that neither of you will remember the next day, looking across the room simply to check if you're smiling. These are the scenes that refuse to leave them. They aren't dramatic enough to tell anyone about, which is probably why they've kept them to themselves. But ordinary routines have started carrying extraordinary emotional weight because your presence somehow makes even the simplest day feel complete in their imagination. That's the part they still haven't fully processed. They weren't looking for someone to transform their life overnight. They were quietly hoping someone would make everyday life feel different. And somehow every picture their mind creates now begins with you already being there. The question they've stopped avoiding is why every version of tomorrow suddenly insists on including you. There is something they settled inside themselves long before anyone else realized a decision had been made. People around them may have assumed there were other options, other possibilities, other people who stood a chance simply because they happened to be nearby. From the outside, it probably looked that way. Conversations continued, familiar faces stayed around, life carried on as usual, but internally, something had already shifted. They would find themselves comparing every interaction to the quiet feeling they carried whenever your name crossed their mind, and every comparison reached the same ending without them trying to force it. That's why their attention started feeling different, more selective, more distant, not because anyone had done something wrong, because once your presence took root inside them, everyone else began feeling strangely temporary. Wait, that's the part nobody around them can quite understand. They think they're still deciding, when in reality the decision has already been living quietly beneath the surface for much longer than anyone realizes. Even now, not once has their heart wandered away from the place it quietly chose first, and that certainty has only grown stronger with time. They've tried distracting themselves more than once, not dramatically, just the ordinary ways people convince themselves they'll move on, keeping busy, filling their schedule, telling themselves enough time would naturally create distance. Oh, for a little while, it almost seemed convincing. Then something completely ordinary would happen, a familiar place, a certain song, someone laughing in a similar way. And before they even noticed it happening, their thoughts had already found their way back to you again. That's what finally caught their attention. It wasn't how often they thought about you, it was how effortlessly their heart kept returning, as though it already knew the way without needing directions. They stopped asking themselves how to stop it because every attempt quietly led to the same place. And after enough of those moments, they began wondering if this wasn't something to escape at all. Because no matter how far their mind wandered during the day, it somehow ended every journey exactly where it began with you. That silent return has become so natural now that even they no longer question why it keeps happening every single time. The feeling has slowly outgrown occasional moments. It doesn't fit inside weekend plans or special occasions anymore. They catch themselves imagining Tuesday afternoons, quiet mornings, ordinary evenings, the kinds of days most people never bother talking about because nothing remarkable happens. Yet somehow, when you're part of those pictures, everything feels different. They imagine reaching for a cup of coffee and seeing you nearby, looking up from whatever they're doing just to find you in the same room, sharing little conversations that won't change the world but will somehow become the favorite part of the day. That's what keeps expanding inside them. It isn't excitement they're chasing anymore. It's consistency. The comfort of knowing you'll be there when life is completely ordinary. And that's when they realize this feeling had crossed into unfamiliar territory. Because people don't quietly wish for someone in almost every ordinary moment unless that person has already started becoming part of the rhythm their heart wants to wake up to every single day. Somehow, the thought of seeing you tomorrow now feels just as important to them as seeing you for the rest of their life. Something unexpected keeps happening whenever they think too far ahead. They don't intentionally place you there. In fact, they've caught themselves trying not to. They'll be thinking about plans that have nothing to do with romance months from now, next year, even little goals they've carried for a long time, and somehow your presence quietly slips into the picture before they even notice it. That's what finally made them stop and pay attention. It wasn't fantasy, it was how natural it felt. They never had to force your name into those thoughts because it was already arriving on its own. They'll imagine introducing an idea, sharing good news, celebrating something ordinary, and without realizing it, you're standing there beside them in every version their mind creates. Oh, that consistency is what unsettles them, because random thoughts disappear. This one keeps returning with the exact same quiet certainty. And every time they try imagining that future without you, something about the picture suddenly feels unfinished, as though the most important part quietly went missing before it ever began. Even the smallest future plan somehow keeps asking for your name before it feels complete. There are moments they would never admit out loud because even they know how personal they've become. Wait, this isn't about dramatic promises or rehearsed speeches. It's much quieter than that. They've started mentally living through little pieces of forever without even realizing they're doing it. They'll picture how an ordinary weekend might feel years from now. They'll imagine reaching for your hand without thinking. They'll wonder which side of the bed you'd naturally choose or what your everyday routines might slowly become together. None of these thoughts arrive with fireworks. They arrive gently, almost like habits forming before the life itself exists. That's what makes this different. They're no longer imagining a beginning. Their mind keeps skipping ahead to what staying would feel like after everything has already settled. And once someone starts rehearsing ordinary forever instead of exciting firsts, it becomes incredibly difficult to convince themselves they're only imagining things. That quiet future has started feeling familiar long before it has ever become real. The word home has quietly begun changing its meaning for them. It isn't about walls or furniture anymore. Oh, it's becoming connected to a feeling they can no longer separate from you. They'll walk through familiar spaces they've known for years, yet something feels incomplete in a way they never noticed before. Then your face crosses their mind, and suddenly the room feels different, warmer, more alive. They aren't decorating imaginary houses in their head. They're imagining what peace would feel like if you were simply part of the same space every single day. That's the picture that keeps returning. Not perfection, not luxury, just you moving naturally through ordinary moments until those moments no longer feel ordinary at all. And the more often that quiet image returns, the harder it becomes for them to remember what home used to mean before your presence slowly started redefining it from the inside out. Somehow, every peaceful place they imagine now quietly begins with you already there. This isn't one of those passing thoughts that disappears as quickly as it arrives. It keeps returning in the quietest hours, when their mind isn't trying to impress anyone or pretend it feels less than it actually does. They don't imagine grand declarations nearly as often as they imagine opening their eyes and finding you peacefully beside them. No celebration, no special occasion. Just the comfort of another ordinary morning beginning together. They wonder what the first few minutes of the day would feel like if your presence became the first thing they noticed instead of another alarm or another responsibility. They've caught themselves smiling at that picture before immediately looking away, almost embarrassed by how real it suddenly feels. That's what surprised them, not the romance, the calm. The feeling that waking up beside you somehow makes the entire day feel lighter before it has even started. Wait. Once that picture settled into their heart, it stopped feeling like wishful thinking and quietly became the morning they keep hoping life eventually gives them. And somehow, every new sunrise they imagine now quietly begins with the comforting certainty that you'll still be there beside them. Most people imagine someone arriving. They've somehow skipped past that part entirely. Oh, what keeps playing in their mind isn't your entrance into their life anymore. It's your presence after you've already settled in. They picture you moving naturally through familiar spaces, reaching for things without asking where they are, laughing comfortably because everything around you already feels known. That's the image they return to again and again. There is something deeply emotional about the fact that their imagination no longer treats you like a visitor. Without realizing it, they've started seeing you as someone who belongs, someone who doesn't have to earn their place every single day because that place already exists. And every time they drift back into that quiet picture, it becomes harder for them to remember a version of life where you eventually leave. Somehow, your staying feels more believable to their heart now than your absence ever could. Even their quietest thoughts have stopped wondering if you'll stay. They only wonder how beautiful that life will feel together. They didn't wake up one morning thinking something was missing. That's the strange part. Their life was functioning. Their routines made sense. Everything looked complete from the outside. Then you appeared. And suddenly they noticed spaces they had never recognized before, not because you pointed them out, because your presence quietly illuminated them. They'll go through an ordinary day, accomplish everything they planned, yet still feel as though something important would have made the day feel fuller if you had simply been part of it. That realization arrived so gradually they almost missed it. It wasn't loneliness, it wasn't dependency, it was recognition. The quiet understanding that some people don't interrupt your life, they somehow complete parts of it you didn't even know were waiting. And ever since that understanding settled inside them, they've stopped asking why they keep returning to thoughts of you. The better question has become why everything felt complete before you and somehow doesn't anymore. That unanswered feeling keeps pulling them back because deep down, their heart has already recognized a place only you seem able to fill. At some point, this stopped being about moments and quietly became about a whole life. That's the shift they never expected to make. They don't just picture seeing you anymore. They picture building around you. Every plan that once belonged only to them has slowly started leaving room for someone else without asking permission first. They'll think about where they want to go, what they want to create, the kind of days they hope to live years from now, and before they even notice, you're already standing somewhere inside those pictures, not because they forced you there, but because leaving you out suddenly makes the vision feel strangely incomplete. That's what finally made them pause. They realized they weren't searching for someone to temporarily fit into their life anymore. They were quietly hoping their entire future would naturally grow around your presence. And once that realization settled in, they could no longer convince themselves this was just another passing feeling. It had already become part of the way they imagined tomorrow. There is one feeling they still haven't found the right words for because it arrived before anything official ever existed between you. Wait, it isn't familiarity from time. It's something much deeper than that. Whenever they picture you now, there isn't distance in the image anymore. There is belonging, the kind that doesn't need to be explained. They don't imagine introducing you to their life as though you're an outsider stepping in. Somehow, Their heart keeps responding as though you've always been part of the story and everyone else simply hasn't caught up yet. That's why thoughts of protecting you, making space for you, sharing ordinary days with you have become so natural. None of it feels forced anymore. It feels instinctive. And perhaps that's the most surprising part of this entire reading. Before a single promise has been spoken, before life has had the chance to bring both of you fully together, something inside them has already stopped treating you like someone they're hoping to meet, and quietly started loving the feeling of you as someone who already belongs. If this felt strangely personal, don't brush it off too quickly. Sometimes the messages that stay with us are the ones we weren't expecting to hear today. Tell me in the comments which moment felt impossible to ignore, because I read them all. And if someone has been quietly on your mind lately, share this with them. They may never tell you what they've been carrying in silence, but this message just might.